Hello everyone and welcome to Paperback Journeys, where today I'm going to be talking about the 5.5 books that I read in the month of November. Which book was my favourite, which book was my least favourite, and then we'll update the top 10 list of the year to see if any of this month's readings make the list. So let's talk about the first book that I read in the month of November, and that book was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. So I didn't know when I picked this book up that it had actually won the Pulitzer Prize. But after reading it, it doesn't surprise me. This one was absolutely an emotional roller coaster. The book weaves together the lives of Marie-Laure, who is this blind French girl, and Werner, who is a German soldier during World War II. And the story alternates between two timelines. So you've got the days leading up to Germany's invasion of France, and then you've got the final moments of the German occupation. Spoiler alert, Germany lost the war, all right? Just in case you didn't know, Germany lost the war. Sorry. Well, no, not sorry. Anthony Doerr's prose is really precise and lyrical, but it never feels as though it tips over into like flowery territory, you know, kind of like purple prose. It never really feels like that. Every sentence feels intentional, but there's this kind of like rhythm to it that pulls you into the story. Chapters are very short, and I think that works really well because it gives the book a feeling of rising momentum and tension. It's one of those books that are really nicely paced, but also quite hard to put down as well because of the short chapters. You know, you think to yourself, oh, I just fit one more in, you know. What really stuck with me, I think, was the contrast between the worlds of Marie-Laure and her kind of innocence, and Werner and his like slow entanglement into this evil regime. The idea of like how people can fall under the spell of dictators with a kind of like a cult mentality. That's endlessly fascinating to me. I actually visited Berlin last year, and it's a city that just has this incredible history, especially over the last 100 years. Just really fascinating place to go. And I spent a lot of time there in all of the museums where you kind of learn about this, how desperate men were caught up in the passionate fervor of nationalism. Werner's arc is really haunting because it shows you how propaganda can take a smart, vulnerable young man and turn all of that potential that he has, or that she has as well, obviously, but in this case, he, into tragedy. And watching this like internal conflict play out with Werner is really heartbreaking, because when we meet him, he's a good kid, and he's an unfortunate kid as well. But it's also like a stark reminder as well of how complex morality becomes when it's put under a lot of pressure, as Germany was in the build-up to World War II. They were still suffering from the fallout of World War I and all of the poverty that followed from that. But this book just shows us, it kind of gives us access to Werner's world where decency is punished and cruelty is rewarded. And if you have any virtue at all, then you'll be mocked and you'll have it beaten out of you. And there are actually some really hard scenes to watch, but in the darkness, there's this little bit of light, and that's really what the book is kind of like referring to, the light we cannot see. There's this line where Marie-Laure is speaking to someone in her family, and she says, "Don't you ever get tired of believing? Don't you ever want proof?" And the family member responds, "You never stop believing. That is the most important thing." And this interaction between these two characters pretty much sums up the entire message of the novel, you know? And talking about Marie-Laure and her perspective, absolutely fascinating. I've just noticed I'm overusing the word fascinating, but it is. This book is that. But her blindness brings this like immersive quality to her experience in war-torn France, her life is, because she's blind, her life is described through sound and touch and memory in a way that feels really vivid and I hadn't really read before. So yeah, excellent there by Anthony Doerr. And she relies on a model of a city that she lives in. And this model is something that her father had built for her. And this is how she's able to learn to make her way around the city. And I really loved her dad, by the way. I love her whole family. I just loved everybody in her family. If I had one complaint, it would be the ending. After such a great build up, to me anyway, it felt a little bit underwhelming. I kept waiting for that big sweeping moment that just never quite arrived for me. I don't know if anyone agrees with me on that. Not sure, but obviously I'm not going to say what the ending is. But yeah, I was thinking all the way through it, is this going to be one of my favorite books? And because this book is like a 10 out of 10, and then the ending was like, not bad at all, but like a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. Do you know what I mean? The next book that I read in the month of November, I read it on Kindle. It's The Running Man by Stephen King. All right, so let me just really quickly get a rant out of the way just for a second, because I want to talk about something that I really, really hate. And it's happened before, and I was foolish to get tricked by it again. I can't stand authors who spoil books in the preface of that book. So at the very beginning of this book, Stephen King was writing this really interesting little thing about how he liked to write under the pseudonym of Richard Bachman. And I was really enjoying it. It was so interesting. And then, bang, right in the middle of a sentence, Stephen King just decides to drop in the ending of The Running Man. And don't worry, I'm not gonna spoil it because I'm not a lunatic, right? Like Stephen King is. But he just kind of drops it in the preface like a bloody dead rat. Recently, I accidentally spoiled the ending of Fight Club to someone that I really like and really respect. And so I don't know if it's just like karma kicking me in the shin, but why are you, I bought this book to read it. Why are you telling me the ending before the book anyway. So The Running Man is set in a dystopian future, and the story follows Ben Richards, who's down on his luck. He's got a sick kid at home, and so he joins this deadly game show where the contestants are hunted down, and then they earn money that they can have transferred to their family for every day that they survive. And you would think that a setup like that might make someone very easy to root for, but honestly, I never felt like I was on this guy's side. I mean, I wasn't against him because he's got a sick kid, so I'm on the kid's side, but I didn't really find him to be a very sympathetic character, you know? It's funny to say this, right? But this book is probably the least Stephen King feeling Stephen King book that I've ever read. Do you know what I mean? He was really, at this stage in his career, it seems like he was really leaning into that Richard Bachman like alter ego. I think that Stephen King is usually so good at developing characters, even like characters that are just side characters, just throwaway characters. He really spends time developing them. And I just didn't care about anyone in this thing. The book, it was just pure pulp, you know? This is the book, right? I'm this rugged, tough guy in a world gone bad. And the system, man, is so systemy and stuff. And I'm gonna tear down this thing. And women, yeah, women are hot or whatever, but I ain't got time for chicks, man. I'm too edgy for that, you know? Yeah, that's the book. That's the book. That's the review. Oh, also, for some reason that was never explained, everyone in this book is a racist. And I get that Stephen King uses racism in a lot of his books. And usually, in my opinion, it fits, right? because it's a thing that exists in our world. And so I think that it should be expressed in fiction if you want it to feel authentic. Not all the time, but when it pops up, you know what I mean? It's believable that some people think like this and feel like this. We don't like them, but they exist. But everyone in this book is a bloody racist, including the protagonist, by the way. You know, but yeah, basically the government's corrupt, the media's evil. You know, we've heard that before, right? The story just had like a really formulaic vibe. It felt like something that ChatGPT could have wrote. Honestly, you know, it was pretty predictable. Especially when he bloody told me the ending. That's really predictable. The next book that I read was The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. So this is a book that everybody seems to love, right? And because of that, I was a little bit nervous going into it. If you don't know, The Sword of Kaigen is a military fantasy about a family of warriors named the Matsuda family who are kind of like grappling with their legacy in a world that feels as though it's kind of like moved on a bit. You know, they dedicate their lives to ancient techniques and magic in the preparation for a war that they're not sure will ever actually show up in their lifetime. This book, I would say, is as much about family dynamics as it is about the military fantasy. And I actually really liked that balance. So often I've read books with this kind of like heavy focus and intricate magic systems, but the characters are so flat that I couldn't really bring myself to care whether they lived or died. And it just kind of feels like, oh wow, imagine if this really cool magic existed. But the Sword of Kaigen made me care about the magic, but also the people who wield it. In fact, I would say the great thing about the magic in this book, and the reason that it feels kind of authentic in the world that M.L. Wang has created, is that it's woven into the culture and the identity of the characters. The Matsuda family are able to manipulate water and ice, and it feels really like an extension of their legacy and their honor, not just a tool for combat. They use it for example, to wash their clothes, and also they use it to construct buildings. They kind of you can use ice as scaffolding, so they're using it for like everyday tasks. And then when it's used in battle, it really feels as though this is a real thing. And I love it when a fantasy book is able to do that with a magic system. I usually tune out during like detailed fight scenes, but here I was hooked. The way that the powers are used is so creative, so fluid. Every fight felt gripping and meaningful. There's also no plot armor in this book. Like any character can just go. And so that makes it a bit more, you know, you feel a bit more nervous in the fight scenes, you know? The two main characters in this book are Mamoru and Masaki. And Mamoru is this teenager that's burdened by the weight of his family's legendary warrior status. He really wants to live up to the Matsuda name. And then you've got Masaki, who is his mother, and she is a former fighter trying to sort of like bury her past and live as the perfect housewife, you know, very mindful, very demure. And that's the first time I've ever said that. That's a little bit of a meme if you don't know. If you haven't been on TikTok, you might not know that reference, but that's the first time I've ever said it. But yeah, it fits. She is very demure, and she's kind of like rejecting who she really is, which is a powerful practitioner of magic. The pacing is a bit chaotic. The first 10% is really heavy on the exposition. There's even like this dense history lesson in the middle of everything where these kids are sat at school learning about the history of their country, and even the kids are bored. And so that was a little bit of a struggle to get through, honestly, those early chapters. You're also thrown into the deep end with terms like names of countries, all these different countries, the types of magics that they use, and religions. They're just thrown in with hardly any context to what's going on. And I just had to keep flipping to the glossary. I'd say in this book, the glossary is an essential part. So if you are going to read this book, go into it with that expectation that you're going to need to check out the glossary. But once you hit, I would say, like the 20% mark, things really take off. It's a great book. So, but if it feels slow at first, just stick with it. Just stick with it. The next book is another book that I read on Kindle, and that is Unsouled by Will White. So this is actually another East Asian inspired fantasy. Unfortunately, this one didn't work for me in the same way that the Sword of Kaigen did. And I DNF'd it at about halfway through. And I know that's going to annoy some people that are watching this video because this is a book series that is deeply beloved. I'll just tell you what the book is about. So Unsouled is a progression fantasy about Lyndon, who is a young man who, unlike everyone else in his community, is born without access to magic because he is unsouled, right? So that's what he's labeled as. And because of that, he's kind of an outcast in their community. He's like looked down upon, even by children. They're sort of like looking down on him like, what a loser, you know? Really, it's kind of rough. Two things that I personally don't really enjoy. I'm not against them, but it's just not something that I'm really drawn to, is anime and progression fantasy. And this book is basically a mixture of those two things. I didn't know that going in. So I can't say that this is a bad book, but just that it doesn't align with what I enjoy. And so I don't think that I can blame a book for being what it is. It's like if you picked up Pride and Prejudice and then you go, oh man, I really hate romance. It's like, all right, well then put it down then, you know, like you can't blame the book. So that's what I did. I put it down. I think you'll like this book if you enjoy things like power leveling or detailed training sequences or battle mechanics. If you're a big fan of lit RPG, that sort of thing, then you'll probably like this. For me, these things can be interesting, you know, as some of it was in the Sword of Kaigen, but I mostly read for the characters, and I must say, in my opinion, the characters in Unsouled, including Lyndon, felt a little bit one-dimensional. So I don't know. I might give it another go at some point in the future. So many people who share the same tastes as me with books really like this as well. I don't know. I didn't have it in me this time. I got like I say, about halfway through, and I was like, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. And I was really excited to read some of the other books that I had planned. The next book that I read in the month of November was The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. It's difficult to say what this book is about without spoiling it. So all I'll say is that it's set in this small town where all of the inhabitants of this town take part in a gathering where they all draw from a lottery. And it's kind of like this festivity that they have in this little town. What's amazing about this to me is how Shirley Jackson can build a world that feels kind of like eerily familiar and foreign at the same time. And it's kind of packed with interesting characters, and there's little twists in there as well, and it all takes place within 12 pages. It's one of the shortest stories that I've ever read. The story opens up on like a sunny summer's day with children playing, and the townspeople are all gathering and they're laughing and they're joking during the festivities. And this kind of setting is intentional as a way to make you like lower your guard and kind of go, okay, this is nice. But because this is Shirley Jackson, you know this is a trap. And so, you know, it kind of has the opposite effect where you're kind of thinking, all right, what's going to happen? What's going on? The story has like hints at a larger strange and disturbing world outside of this small town. And it's the kind of narrative that prompts you to ask questions and piece everything together, like kind of fill in all the missing parts for yourself after you read it. And if you read it a second time, like I did, I think you can catch little subtle details that make you kind of shiver, you know? I really enjoyed this little thing, and I actually listened to it on Spotify. If you have Spotify and you can listen to books, because you have that 15-hour limit, I highly recommend all of your short stories, you listen to them on Spotify if they're there, because, you know, might as well use it if you've got it, eh? The next book I read was Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the sequel to The Assassin's Apprentice, and so what I'm going to do, I'm going to avoid spoilers just for the entire series. So I'm not going to talk about anything specific that happened in this book or the first book, because, you know, you might not have read even the first book. So don't worry, you're safe. I'm not going to give any spoilers. I'm not Stephen King, all right? I'm not Stephen King in the preface. I really enjoyed the first book, The Assassin's Apprentice. I think the thing that I loved most about the first book was the kind of like immersive language that's used by Robin Hobb. I spoke previously about like the sensory details that she uses to make you feel the world that she's created. Rather than just find out about it, you can feel it. And reading her books, I think, feels as though you are going somewhere. The difference, I think, between the first book and the sequel was that whilst Assassin's Apprentice was really centered on Fitz's personal growth and training as an assassin, Royal Assassin broadens the scope. Political intrigue is really what's at the center of everything here. And the stakes kind of escalate from in the first book, Fitz finding his place in this world to now being more established in this world. And it's more about like the survival of the entire six duchies. Enemies that were only hinted at before now become direct threats, and Fitz kind of steps into more of an active role in facing them. And there's more like battle scenes in this book than there was in Assassin's Apprentice. I actually really like the way that Robin Hobb writes battle scenes, because rather than being detailed blow by blow accounts, they're more about the atmosphere. The way I can describe it, right, is that it's like seeing a watercolor painting of a battle instead of action-packed snapshots, you know, or a movie. It's like looking at a painting rather than watching a movie of a battle scene. And I actually really loved that approach. One thing I really loved in the first book was the sense of wonder. And in this book, it's a little bit lacking, but I think that's understandable. I think that's always going to be the case in a sequel, because going into the second book, I'm already familiar with the world. And so the sense of discovery of this world naturally sort of fades away. And instead of like marveling in awe of the setting and all of the little secrets that are popping up, I found myself kind of drawn more into the politics and the conflicts and the struggles of the people, you know? Also, Fitz's powers develop a little more in this book. His ability with the wit and the skill, if you don't know, that the skill is kind of like having power over people's minds or being able to communicate with people telepathically, kind of like Jedi mind tricks. Do you know what I mean? And the wit is that, but with animals. So it's kind of frowned upon to use the wit in this universe. People are afraid that if you use the wit too much, then you'll start to become like an animal. But seeing those powers develop inside of Fitz was great. Also, there's like new arrivals of like animal characters that he can have connections with. One in particular that I really liked. So, yeah, I thought that was really great and much more developed in this book than in the first book. Also, the antagonist in The Royal Assassin is absolutely just like, I hate this guy. I really hate this guy in a good way. It's good hate. It's good hate. Let me try and describe this character. So instead of being overtly powerful and ominous, he's cowardly and manipulative, and he thrives by exploiting the goodness of others and the rules that they are willing to follow, that he is willing to break. It's very frustrating watching Fitz and all of those around him just struggle with this dynamic of wanting to crush this enemy, but also being unable to because of certain established moral codes and hierarchy. Just, it had me a little bit frustrated with the protagonists, because at some points I was just picking up the book just get him, just get him. Do you know what I mean? Just, he's there, you could just get him, you're an assassin, just get him. But it would destabilize everything. It would destabilize the kingdom if you did it. So it's just like, overall, I really enjoyed this one, especially the cliffhanger ending, and I can't wait to pick up the final book in the trilogy and then go beyond that into the rest of the series. So this is like the first trilogy in the larger series called The Realm of the Elderlings. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying it, man. So that's everything that I read this month. Now, which was my least favorite book of the bunch? Unfortunately, the book that I enjoyed least was Unsouled by Will White. It just didn't work for me, because the things that it does really well are the things that matter to me the least in fiction. So this is just a personal thing for me, and I think, I mean, it's got a good rating on Goodreads, you know, so yeah, lots of people really like this. And like I say, people where I share their interests, they like Unsouled as well. But let's move on to the best book that I read this month. There's definitely a couple that could qualify. The Lottery by Shirley Jackson was just so quick and creepy, like a little gut punch. Then All the Light We Cannot See was this beautiful tragedy with little glimmers of hope kind of woven in. Just before I tell you my favorite book of the month, if you'd like more up-to-date reviews from me, then you can follow me on Goodreads. I've got the link to my Goodreads and all of my social media stuff in the description box below. But anyway, back to my favorite book of the month. I'm going to have to give it to, and it was close, The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. It had a little bit of a bumpy start, but once things got moving, I really enjoyed it. The magic system was awesome, but more than that, it felt authentic, and the characters were really easy to root for. But here's the big question. Does it make it to my top 10 reads of 2024? So let's bring down the leaderboard now and take a look at the current top 10. So here's how it currently stands. In number 10, we've got The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. Such a creepy little book that was. Then we've got Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Told you I liked it. Hyperion by Dan Simmons. The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, another terrifying one. The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. Misery by Stephen King. Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. Last month I made a mistake and said it was by Herman Melville, so very embarrassing, but you know, we get over it, The Dark Forest by Liu Cixin. 11/22/63 by Stephen King. And then finally, the best book that I've read so far this year is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Now, these books are all sitting in their positions in November. So there's just this month's and next month's reading to stack it up against. Can they survive December? They got to be feeling comfortable. However, I can tell you that this month, I am going to add one book to the top 10 list. And so unfortunately, that does mean that we lose The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. Let's load up the book cannon. So let's take a look at the new top 10 for 2024 and see how that's changed things. As you can see, the Sword of Kaigen has just grabbed hold of that number 10 spot. It's going to have to hope and pray that I don't read a banger in the month of December, because if I do read an incredible book, it's going to get loaded into the book canon. I'm sorry. Oh, just some channel updates as well. Lads and ladies, and everyone else, guys, we hit 10,000 subscribers, which is, it's just mental, isn't it? It's mental. We hit 10,000 subscribers. I'm going to do a proper video where I thank all of you, but I just wanted to slip this in, just a big thank you. Thank you. Because of you, the cult keeps growing. Not the cult, right? It's not a cult. It's a booktube community, and it keeps growing, and it's not a cult, right? I'm so happy to have you all along for the journey. I like I say, I want to do like a Q&A thing. So if you have any questions that you want answered in the 10K Q&A, then please put them down in the comments below. I'll try and answer all of them. They don't have to be about books. It can really be about anything. Also, another channel update. Starting next year, I'm going to set up a Discord so that we can all vote every month and have like read-alongs every month. Some other channels do that as well. And so I thought that's a really lovely idea. Real nice, to solidify the cult, the community. That was the month of November. So now we move on. We move on to the last month of the year, December. Will the top 10 list survive, or will I read something that can steal a place at the last second? As always, I'm going to be spinning this wheel to find out what I'm going to be reading in the coming month. So if you'd like to see me spin the wheel for the month of December, then you can click up here to find out what I'm going to be reading. All of the books that I mentioned in this video are linked in the description below. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for 10K subscribers. Absolutely blinding. Happy reading. Thanks so much. Oh, that's a nice drop.